In return for his testimony, Chris Ochoa avoided the death penalty, but he was sentenced to life in prison.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we'll be looking at 10 times people confessed to murders they didn't commit.
So why don't you just let it off your chest, huh? When it starts to mess up with your mind.
For this list, we'll be examining the most egregious miscarriages of justice in which an innocent person was convicted of murder based on a false confession. What other wrongful murder convictions did we miss? Let us know in the comments below. Alstory Simon. Over the years, Northwestern University's Medill Justice Project has done great work to help exonerate multiple wrongfully convicted people. However, in 1999, while handling the case of Anthony Porter, they ended up sending another innocent man to prison. Porter had been convicted of the 1982 murders of Marilyn Green and Jerry Hillard in Chicago. Northwestern University professor David Protis and his students helped secure evidence that exonerated Porter in 1999. Part of that evidence was the confession of another man named Alstory Simon, who was subsequently sentenced to 37.5 years in prison. Simon, however, recanted his confession, and it was later discovered that the Medill Justice Project had coerced him into admitting to the crime. Simon was released after spending 15 years in prison.
After pleading guilty to these crimes in 1999, Mr. Simon has been serving his sentence until today. Even though Mr. Simon is due to be released in less than 3 years, justice compels that I take action today.
Christopher Ochoa.
Even though you're taught in school what your rights are and all this as Americans, at that time, everything goes out the window. You just don't know what's going on.
In October of 1988, Nancy DePriest was assaulted and murdered at the Austin, Texas restaurant where she worked. Soon after, Christopher Ochoa and Richard Danziger, two men who worked for the same restaurant chain in another location, became prime suspects in the case. During an interrogation, Ochoa was reportedly threatened by police that he would be executed if he didn't confess.
At one point, one of them grabbed my arm and tapped my arm, the vein. Said, "This is where the needle's going to go if you don't cooperate with us."
Seemingly without any other option, Ochoa admitted to the crime and implicated his friend Danziger. Both men were eventually convicted and handed life sentences. Ochoa and Danziger were finally exonerated in 2002 after another Texas inmate, Akeem Marino, wrote a letter to then-Governor George W. Bush owning up to the murder.
"Wait a minute, you don't know?" I said, "No, I have no clue what you're talking about." Then he tells me apparently Marino, his name was Akeem Marino. He is the guy that actually did the crime.
Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott.
You're the coldest guy I've ever talked to in my life. Are you a cold-blooded murderer?
No, sir, I'm not.
In 1991, 4 girls were killed at a yogurt shop in Austin, Texas. Whoever was responsible then set the place on fire, seemingly in an attempt to destroy evidence. The case soon grew cold until 1999, when 4 young men were arrested and charged with the murders. 2 of them, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott, eventually confessed, while the others, Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn, maintained their innocence.
I remember looking at this girl. I cry. I hear Robert saying, "Do it, do it."
With no physical evidence implementing them, Pierce and Wellborn were let go, while Springsteen and Scott were tried and convicted based on their confessions. The convictions were later overturned on constitutional grounds. A re-examination of the DNA evidence ruled out both men, and the prosecution declined to retry the case.
And that is the hope, is to help the girls and the families get some resolution at the end of the day.
The Norfolk Four.
Joe Dick was not here today. Dan Williams was not here today because just recently both got, for the first time since they've been released, full-time jobs. They did not want to miss a day of work.
Michelle Moore Bosco, the wife of a U.S. Navy sailor, was found dead in her Norfolk, Virginia apartment on July 8, 1997. Police arrested another Navy sailor, Daniel Williams, who confessed to the crime after a 9-hour interrogation. 3 other sailors, Joseph Dick Jr., Derek Tice, and Eric Wilson, were implicated and also confessed after lengthy interrogations.
Probably really sank in after that, I messed up. And I should have stood my ground.
All 4 men were convicted and handed varying prison sentences, even though DNA evidence from the crime scene matched none of them. Another man named Omar Ballard was also convicted of the Moore Bosco murder. Ballard gave a more accurate confession to police and was a match with the DNA evidence. The Norfolk Four were eventually exonerated in 2016 and granted absolute pardons the following year.
Time heals everything, and eventually you're able to see through everything and realize exactly what was going on.
Laverne Pavlinac.
She's pointed out the dump site. She's confessed to us on tape. She's told her own daughter the same story, very convincingly.
The death of 23-year-old Tanya Bennett in Portland, Oregon, confounded investigators, albeit for a short while. A few weeks after Bennett's body was found, a woman named Laverne Pavlinac told police that her boyfriend John Savnovsky was the perpetrator. She also confessed to being an accomplice to the crime. Turns out it was all a lie. Apparently, Pavlinac had conjured up the story in hopes of getting out of her violent relationship with Savnovsky by sending him to prison. But she ended up implicating herself and was found guilty alongside Savnovsky of the crime. Their convictions were overturned after Keith Jesperson, also known as the Happy Face Killer, admitted to taking Bennett's life.
He was a very charismatic, considerate young man, and I had no clue that this is what he would become.
Peter Riley. On the night of September 28, 1973, Peter Riley returned home from church to find his mother's deceased body. Responding police officers thought of Riley's behavior as suspicious and grilled him for over 24 hours. In the end, the 18-year-old signed a statement incriminating himself in the murder. Even though Riley retracted his confession and there was hardly any evidence linking him to the crime, he was declared guilty. The case gained significant attention, including that of famed playwright Arthur Miller, who donated money to his legal costs. Upon appeal, Riley's lawyers were able to get the case dropped after the original prosecutor suddenly passed away and his replacement found inconsistencies in the case. The Guilford Four.
First Hill, then Conlon. Armstrong Richardson confessed to the bombing. They're the IRA's ASU.
One of the most outrageous miscarriages of justice in British history, the Guilford Four were tried and convicted of the 1974 Guilford pub bombings. The tragic incident, which caused the deaths of 5 people and injured 65 others, was attributed to the Irish Republican Army. Paul Hill, Jerry Conlon, Paddy Armstrong, and Carol Richardson were arrested in the aftermath and allegedly subjected to days of physical and mental torture.
There was no way that Jerry Connolly was involved in any bombings because Jerry Connolly wasn't in the IRA.
As a result, they signed confessions, which were instrumental in securing convictions and life sentences for all of them. After spending 14 years in prison, the Guilford Four were exonerated and freed when exculpatory evidence came to light. To date, no one else has faced justice for the bombings.
I want to tell them that until my father is proved innocent, until all the people involved in this case are proved innocent, until the guilty ones are brought to justice, I will fight on.
Joe Arity. In August of 1936, Dorothy Drain and her sister Barbara were attacked in their Pueblo, Colorado home. Dorothy lost her life in the process, while Barbara miraculously survived. In the neighboring state of Wyoming, a man named Joe Arity was arrested for a misdemeanor, but was eventually questioned about the Drain murder. Police capitalized on Arity's mental incapacities and coerced him into confessing to the crime. Even though another man who worked for the Drains had also confessed and was identified by Barbara, Arity was convicted and sentenced to death. Due to his intellectual limitations, Arity was seemingly oblivious of his impending execution right until the day it happened. In 2011, he was posthumously pardoned by then-Governor of Colorado, Bill Ritter. Willie Stuckey and David McCallum. On October 15, 2014, David McCallum walked out of prison after being wrongfully locked up for 29 years. Sadly, his alleged partner in crime, Willie Stuckey, passed away behind bars 13 years earlier. Stuckey and McCallum had been convicted of the 1985 murder of Nathan Blenner when they were just teenagers. A witness had placed them at the scene, resulting in their arrest and interrogation.
He asked me, did I know Willie Stuckey? I said, he was a friend of mine. Police officer Buddha said to me that Willie said, I shot Nathan Blenner.
Police manipulated Stuckey and McCallum to turn on themselves by stating that the other had implicated them in the crime. The two were convicted, largely based on their confessions, and sentenced to 25 years to life. They were exonerated in 2014 after a review of the case produced no physical evidence tying them to the murder.
It's absolutely and unequivocally the worst mistake of my life. I don't think anything can actually compare to that.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. The Central Park Five.
So now we're going back through the statement from the top again. What did you do? Who were you with? Who did you come with? And same answers again.
On the night of April 19th, 1989, Tricia Miley was jogging in New York Central Park when she was attacked and left for dead. Antron McCrae, Kevin Richardson, Yusef Salam, Raymond Santana, and Corey Wise, all black and Hispanic teenagers, were quickly arrested for the crime. The five boys were subjected to hours of intense interrogation without their lawyers present.
Confrontation followed by denial, followed by "you're a liar, I want to hear the truth," can go on for hours.
Seemingly scared and exhausted, they eventually confessed to attacking Miley. Although they recanted their statements soon after, all five were convicted and handed varying sentences. In 2002, the Central Park Five were proven innocent after an inmate named Matthias Reyes owned up to the crime. The men had their convictions overturned and subsequently received a $41 million settlement from New York City. Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.